All right, we're back again. Welcome to everybody who's watching. Thank you for joining us. We are going live for pretty much 2 days straight, interviewing all the authors of Unleashing Your Soul Level Magic, which is this gorgeous book right here. We have 12 authors sharing stories about how they've overcome challenges by using some of their inner gifts. And today we have interviewed a whole bunch of authors. Right now we have Samantha Bauer with us. So welcome, Samantha.
Thanks for having me. I think I'm one of the last ones too, so you're probably getting tired.
No, I'm good. I'm good because everybody has had such great energy and everybody's so excited about their stories that kind of I'm feeding off of it. So
Oh, good.
yeah. So if anybody has watched the whole set of videos, hopefully I'm still look perky by the end.
You seem perky to me.
Yeah, so we're talking about all these really powerful stories, and I wanted to start out by letting you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we're going to dive in and start talking about what you shared in the book.
Yeah, so I own an insurance agency, Bauer Agency at Goosehead Insurance, and we're in Saxonburg, PA. We sell insurance. So we do car and home, and we're a brokerage. And I'm just about to celebrate my 4-year anniversary in this business in May. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome,
Yeah,
congratulations.
thanks.
Yeah, so this is a good time to be doing this and be launching a book and kind of having lots of celebrations this spring.
Yeah, it's really exciting because when you build a new business, especially in the insurance industry, it takes about 3 years to really kind of get traction and get going. So we're an exciting part of our business phase where we're in the scaling phase. So I've brought on some employees in the last few months, and we're getting ready to ramp up. And it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to get to be a part of this book as well.
That's awesome. So we had talked briefly about your desire to share your story beforehand, and so I wanted to know what inspired you to join the Unleashing book.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard about it, it just seemed like something that I would like to be a part of. Encouraging other women to lean into who they were created to be is a passion of mine. I have a podcast that's exactly what the goal of that podcast is. And so when you told me the goal of the book, I thought, wow, what a great opportunity for me to kind of dip my toes into writing by just doing a chapter instead of an entire book, but also the opportunity to share my story and hopefully inspire other women who may have been going through something similar to me or been in a similar situation and not really thought that they could make a change. Because I was in that spot where I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know how to get out of what I'm in because I'm in pretty deep. I just didn't know that I could do it. And I did it, and it's changed my life. And I really want to empower other women to know that they can do that too.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and I completely agree. A lot of people get to that point where they're like, I've gone this far, don't I have to just keep going?
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that part of the story and, kind of what that feeling was for you? Because other people are probably out there going, I want to make a change. I don't know how. I've come so far on this path.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I mean, my whole career up until I made this leap into business ownership was that I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. And so I worked really, really hard for somebody else. I went, above and beyond, and I worked a ton of hours, and I did all the things I needed to do to put myself in a place where I was climbing the ladder, and I was getting there. I was, being courted to move into a vice president role at the company that I was working at. So from the outside looking in, it looked like, wow, I'm achieving the things that I really set out to achieve. But on the inside, I was like dying because I was being overworked, so many hours, traveling all the time. I had 2 little kids that I missed like 2 to 3 years of their lives just because I was never around, kind of getting beat up at work by, management, because that's how that works, being challenged to lead. in a way that I did not feel comfortable leading. And I enjoyed that journey, and I learned a ton about leadership and managing people and business and budgeting and all of those things that are essential tools to running your own business. But I just felt like this is not what God had in store for me when he gave me these beautiful children and my husband. And so I think in hindsight, I know God used that time to mold me and to give me the skills that I need to run my own business. But it's very clear defining time that I realized that's not where he wanted me anymore. I was getting a lot of pressure to lead in a way that I didn't feel comfortable leading. There were just a whole lot of like big red flags happening. And so I knew it was time to make a change. And that's when I started pursuing like what else is there. And I'd always wanted to own my own business. But I was making, $140,000 salary with bonuses. I had that corner office. I had the company car and the company credit card, and my husband was a stay-at-home parent at the time. And I just felt like, oh my goodness, how can I go from that to literally having no income? Because when you start a business, you don't have an income coming in. But through lots of prayer and blessings, we figured it out, and here we are. So, but yeah, definitely that feeling of being stuck, where and having the faith to know that, if this is something that God wants for me and I start taking the steps, the doors are going to start opening. And they did. And so that's where, it's still a leap because you didn't know how it was going to turn out. But having that faith to do it is really what got me over the hump. And just, I haven't looked back.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So how do you think that your corporate job kind of affected the way you lead now?
Well, yeah, in a lot of ways. So, in a corporate setting, there's a lot of things you can't do. And there's a lot of things that you have to do that you might not even believe are the right decisions, but it's because there's somebody higher than you telling you like, hey, this is the decision that the company is making. And you've basically got to get behind it and also get those 80 people that report to you behind it as well. And so I learned a lot. I had a lot of amazing leaders in my corporate journey. I also had a couple leaders that I learned how not to lead from. But if anything, I learned that people matter more than numbers. And that's something that I didn't feel was happening in my last position. I felt like the numbers mattered more than the people. And I had a really hard time sleeping at night when I was trying to manage to that. People are humans and we're all humans, and we need to treat each other with respect and kindness and love. And I know that so many times in the business world, people might say like, oh, you can't do that. Like, you can't talk about those kind of words. Those are soft and easy. But leading with love doesn't always mean you're a pushover. Leading with love means you're willing to have hard conversations with people in a way that doesn't make them feel like garbage. And that's the difference, right? When I was there, I felt like I was being pressured to shame people if they weren't performing well. It was like a big public sales leader thing. And if you were at the bottom, like it was just not something that I will ever do to people. But actually, when I started this, and my husband joined my agency just 6 months ago, and one of the things we sat down and talked about as we scale is, what are the things we hated about working for a corporate job? Like, and we talked about just simple things like calling off. We hated calling off because somebody made you feel crappy that your kid was sick or that you couldn't make it into work that day. And like, we never want people to feel cruddy calling us and telling us they can't come into work. Like, it's just a cruddy thing. So like, just, we kind of went through the things that we really didn't like about working in a corporate setting. And we've made a list of those, and we decided like, we're never going to make our people feel that way, or we're never going to create a culture where, people feel bad about themselves because they got sick or, whatever, they're having a bad time of their life, so their sales aren't up. It's it's helping people work through that instead of pushing them down farther. Like, that's all they need is to come to work. And that's honestly, eh, those are the things that we've decided, like, let's, instead of saying like, what does everybody love about going to work? Because, it's at the end of the day, it's a job. It's what do we hate about our prior jobs? What did we just gave us that pit in our stomach that made us feel sick? And how can we not make people feel that way?
Yeah, I really like that. I think it's interesting how our previous experiences shape how we are today.
Yeah.
I know I've had some rough experiences with corporate jobs too, where I would say I really enjoyed the work, but I hated working there.
Yeah.
And you took that idea and said, all right, we're gonna make a change. And I really hope that a lot of leaders today are doing that and saying, this wasn't working. What works now and how can we make it better? So
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of an opposite way, because initially you think like, okay, how can I make people love it here? And then it's like, wait a minute, how can I make people not have that pit in their stomach? Because that's awful. And I don't want employees that feel that way. We want them to feel comfortable and safe, and that their hard work is going to be honored. And I remember one day my husband was in the hospital, and I asked to work from home because our home was like really close to the office. And my boss said, you can work from home, but you have to take a day off. Like, you have to take PTO. And I was like, well, I like,
But
why
you're
would I
not,
do that? If I'm going to take PTO, I'm not going to work.
yeah,
Um, but that was the kind of stuff that I was like, I'm not doing that to people.
yeah, that's crazy. So I know that you had some big epiphanies, and I wanted to talk about one of the moments in your book that I loved was when you were talking about the generations before you and how you looked up to them and how it was getting to that point where like you're in their spot now. And I'd like to have you talk about that part because it was such a poignant moment. And, I think we all have that moment where we're sitting there going, okay, the ball's in my hands now. What am I going to do with it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm there like climbing the ladder, right? Doing the things, trying to like make this corporate career. And in like probably a 1.5 year period of time, my grandparents' entire generation passed on. So it was just like one after the other. And we all went to the same church. I grew up in a small church that my whole family went to. I grew up on a farm. Um, all the generations before me and my family on my dad's side were pastors, farmers, and small business owners. And so I was sitting in one of the last of the brothers of that generation's funeral, and it was just interesting because the family, and this happened in my grandpa's, but I think in my grandpa's funeral I was too close to him to have like, it's not that I wasn't sad about this funeral, but I was distant enough from this relative that I was just sitting there enjoying the funeral. I wasn't really a part of it. I was just enjoying the memories that people were sharing about him. And I mean, it was so beautiful. They were talking about just him being there all the time, him being active in the church, him singing on Christmas Eve at the Christmas Mass, and being very active in the community. And all of the grandkids had these amazing stories about him. And I'm thinking like, wow, that's similar to how my grandpa was. It's similar to how his brothers and sisters were. And even my own parents, my dad was a realtor and he was at every softball game I ever had. He was always present, but always had we always had enough. And it was as though, as I'm sitting there, listening to these stories and thinking about my own life, about how I work 60 hours a week and the only day I have off is Sunday and I'm never with my family. And I really felt that God was just asking me the question, like, Sam, what are they going to say about you when you die? And in that moment, I cried because I was like, what are they going to say about me when I die? Like, she was nice and fun, but she was never around. And how can I make an impact, on my kids' lives and on the community and on other people if all I'm doing is working this job that was literally sucking the life out of me? So it was really in that moment. And it was kind of like this weird, because our church, we always sat in the same pews. And so I was in the back because I was late because I was at work and I had to get there. So I was kind of sitting in the back by myself, and I'm looking at these pews of the church where my grandparents sat and their brothers and sisters sat, and I grew up, playing tic-tac-toe in the back of the church bulletin with my grandpa. And it was as though like they were all there, like, you, Sam, like, there's more for you. Like, God created you to be way more than a corporate businesswoman. And so that for me was a very pivotal moment where I just knew like God had something bigger and better for me. And I needed to start seeking what that could be.
I love that story. So, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who have had that same experience and then just not known what to do. So I'm really glad that you shared your story and talked about how you said, you know what, I'm gonna do this. And you figured out what to do and moved forward regardless of all the hurdles in your way. So it's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's I often think about them and credit them a lot. My parents figured it out, and it's funny, when I decided to do this, I was worried, because there's always naysayers whenever you start your own business, right? There's always people that say you're crazy. And there were people that did that, but none of them were my family. My whole family was like 100% behind me. I think just really happy that I finally got my priorities straight. Um, and that I was going to do something that was actually the best, not just for what I thought I was trying to achieve something, but for, my family and for my future generations, because this business is definitely going to change the trajectory of all of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, so I was wondering, with your story, there were a lot of pieces that, like, when I was reading through it, it made me cry because, it was so relatable. And you did go really deep on a lot of these pieces. So I was wondering what was challenging for you about sharing your story.
Probably, well, I mean, I think I shared with you, I wrote a lot of my chapters in a coffee shop while my daughter was at her theater school, and I'd be sitting there typing, and all of a sudden I'd be like bawling. I'm like, oh my gosh, if people in this coffee shop are looking at me right now, they're wondering what kind of crazy things I was going. But it was def it was definitely therapeutic to write this and kind of search a little bit deeper into some of the things that I did experience that I didn't even realize impacted me in the way that they did. And I think probably one of the things that might have made you laugh and cry was, um, just realizing that I wasn't a part of my kids' lives from other people's perspective. So like showing up at school when I had never met the teachers before and never knew any of the other moms, because my husband always took my kids to school, and I had taken a day off to take my son on his field trip. And one of the other moms actually told me that they thought I was dead. Like they thought my husband was a widow. And it took me back, and it hurt my feelings. And in hindsight, it obviously, like, it hurt my feelings a little bit, but it's because I was never there. And so it was just like that kind of shock of, I really did have my priorities screwed up. I was putting everything into this corporate journey that I thought, I'm going to show my daughter that mommy can break the glass ceiling, and that I can sit in the room with men, and I can negotiate, and I can, build teams, and I can do all those things. But I was like so off on other other things that were far more important. And so that probably for me was the most eye-opening part of it, was really kind of realizing and accepting that I thought I was doing the things that I needed to do, and I thought I was where God wanted me. And I still think I was, because again, like, nothing's on accident. Like, he had me there for a reason, probably so I could realize this as soon as I did and make a change for my family. But that was probably like one of the hardest moments, is like realizing I was so off. And and thinking through that, and my kids have always been amazing with anything that I've done, but they've always told me too, even at preschool, like, mommy, you're different than the other mommies. Like, you're not picking us up every day or doing the things. And that was kind of hard to look back on and really kind of realize how off I was.
Yeah. I can see that. It makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Mm.
I'm grateful that I realized it when I did. It's
Yeah.
like, God smacks you in the head like a V8 commercial. And you're like, oh, sorry. I thought I was doing this for you. And I was, in my heart, I was like, all right, God, I'm gonna do what you have me to do. If you have me here, I know it's for a reason and I know I have a purpose here. So I'm going to make the most of it. But that last year at my prior job, it was a lot of tears and a lot of car rides with a pit in my stomach. I missed my kids' first time ever getting on the school bus. I missed, I never got to go to a Mother's Day brunch at preschool. Like those
Mhm.
are things I can't get back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
that was
hard.
probably the hardest thing to like kind of think through.
Yeah, it would be. Um, so what do you want people to take away from your chapter? After they get through it, what do you think is the big message?
I think the big message is that you can make a change. So if you are in a situation where you just can't think about like, how do I shift out of this? How do I give up a big salary or this corporate job to start out on my own? That you can, and it's never too late. And I was 38 when I did it. I was almost 20 years into, well, it was about, 16 years into my corporate career. And I worked so hard to get there. And, making good money and having all those things. But the shift is incredible. And you just have to take that next right step. So I think a lot of people think about making a change and they can't wrap their head around how to do it, or they can't see the longer picture because it just seems too hard. So they don't do anything. They just stay where they are and they stay miserable and they stay in that job and it continues to suck the life out of them. But my encouragement is that if there's something in your heart that's different than what you're doing now, start taking steps. And if it is God's will, He will open the doors up for you. I mean, one thing after the other. As soon as I started taking a step, and it was just as simple as calling back this girl who wanted to sell me a franchise, of Goosehead. And I called and I just started learning about it. And then the next thing I knew, we figured out how to fund the franchise fee so that I could buy the agency. And then the next thing I knew, my husband started looking for a job to see if he could find something to replace some income so we could pay the bills. And he got a job making 30% more than he did before he became a stay-at-home parent. Like one door after the other just started opening. It's not like I just went in and quit my job and didn't have things ready. Just start taking the action and God's going to respond with open doors, putting the right people in your path, putting the right resources in your path. But pursue that, and it could be the smallest step that opens up that next door, but don't stay stuck because that stinks.
Yes, it does. Really good advice. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for letting me be a part of this book and getting to share my story like this. It's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, but I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't honestly know that I had a story. I mean, I knew I had a story, but I guess I didn't know I had enough of a story to write even a whole chapter. But as I started pursuing it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this happened and this happened and this is how I got here. And it really was empowering to look back and see, all the things that did happen and all the doors. So I guess that's probably another piece of advice is as you're taking those action steps and the doors are opening, you might not even realize it until you go and look back in hindsight and realize like, oh my gosh, that happened right at the right time. Or, prior to me taking these steps, there was a series of events. There was a series of things that happened that catapulted me to make this decision. And even though some of them are hard, that those experiences with the moms and that kind of stuff was really, really hard. But God had that happen on purpose so that, it would kick my butt a little bit in the right direction.
Yeah. And then it's just baby steps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That we're still
Awesome.
taking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a journey. So yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, for talking about your chapter. It's a beautiful chapter. So for those of you watching, if you don't have the book yet, Unleashing Your Soul Level Magic, and it is available today because we're continuing to celebrate because we hit #1
Yay.
bestseller yesterday. So we are extending our sale on the ebook, and you can get it for 99 cents today. That sale ends at the end of the day, so make sure you grab it. Of course, the paperbacks and the ebook are going to be available forever. So you'll be able to get it afterwards, just not at the sale price. Thank you for watching. Thank you to Samantha for joining us. And could you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, so on Facebook, if you go to Goosehead Insurance Samantha Bauer, or it might be Sam Bauer. It's either Sam or Samantha Bauer. My email is samantha.bauer@goosehead.com. You can find me on Instagram at I should have probably looked this up before I came on here to tell you, but I think it's Bauer Insurance 10 on Instagram. So I'm on social media, and we could put it in the comments, I'm sure. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
afterwards you can do that. Awesome. Oh, and your podcast. Where can they
Oh
find
yeah.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So I have a podcast. It's called the Wherever You Go podcast. So if you're searching on Apple or Spotify or wherever, it's the Wherever You Go podcast. Or if you just search Samantha Bauer on there, it'll pop up as well. And I would love it if you would take a listen and give me some feedback.
Yes, it's an amazing podcast. Well, thank you for being on. Thanks to everybody for watching, and make sure you get a copy of Unleashing Your Soul Level Magic.
Thank you.